Thank you very much to the Stepsky family for this chance to study a bit together. See some old friends, so it's a pleasure to be here. I don't mean you're old, I just mean old friends. We're all getting younger, right? Chanukah is a time to think about something basic and I think very inspiring and fundamental to all of Jewish thinking. In fact, what I'd like to share with you, some people have said, is the most important thing they ever heard. So it's worth paying attention. Let me give you the context, and then we'll see if we can think through this subject fully. Here's the context. The Torah describes two events next to each other, and the reason that they appear next to each other is not obvious. And that is the gifts of the princes of the tribes who brought their gifts for inauguration of the Mishkan, right? What we call Chanukah Samizbech. The word Chanukah means inauguration, dedication, ignition. The root of the word is chinuch, which we translate conventionally as education, which really is the ignition of a child's intellectual pathway. So chinuch translate as initial education. Chanukah means the initial dedication or inauguration of the Mizbech, the altar, the Mishkan. That's what they brought their gifts to honor. So each tribe of the Jewish people, represented by their Nasi, their prince, their leader, brought gifts. And as you all know, the Torah goes into great detail describing the lavish gifts that they all brought. That parsha ends, that's Nasoi. The next parsha, Ba'aloischa, describes the mitzvah that Hashem gave Aaron, the high priest, to light the menorah. Right? The classic seven-branched menorah in the Mishkan, which later became the Beis HaMikdash. And Rashi asks the obvious question, what are these two doing next to each other? They're not accidents in Torah. Torah is written by one who doesn't need to take a literary license. He can do whatever he wants. And if he wants to put these two incidents together in the Torah, there have to be a connection. So what's the connection between the gifts of the Nesim, the handsome gifts brought in inauguration of the Mishkan, and the mitzvah in the Mishkan of lighting the menorah that was given to Aaron? That's the question. So far, so good? Any questions about the question? What's the connection between what's the sequence of events here between them? So Rashi says, quoting Midrashim, Rashi says that the reason these two are put together is because Aaron the priest, the high priest, when he saw these illustrious princes, heads of their tribes, representing their tribes, bringing their gifts, he was tremendously dismayed, distressed beyond description, because neither he nor his tribe had a part to play. He was watching while they bring their inaugural gifts, and he stands there watching. Since, obviously, Rashi doesn't say this, but we understand that Aaron was a person whose life is nothing other than service of Hashem. That's what a high priest means. His life is nothing other than service of Hashem. To be sitting idle when others are serving Hashem in this incredible electric moment of inspiration and inauguration of the Mishkan, that is beyond what he could handle. So Hashem said, fear not, you have a role to play. You light the menorah. And in fact, the language of the Medrash is quite extreme. Chayecha is the language, means Hashem, so to speak, taking an oath. Your share is greater than theirs because you light the menorah. And when he heard that he lights the menorah, he has a role to play, he was appeased, and that's the juxtaposition. So far, so good? Makes sense? Well, the Ramban disagrees with you. The Ramban says this Rashi doesn't begin to make sense. And he has a list of problems and difficulties with this Rashi. Number one, Aaron is jealous. That means upset. He's dismayed. He has no role to play in the Mishkan. He is the Mishkan. The priests, he and his tribe, they do everything. They bring the sacrifices. They bring the incense, which is the highest of the sacrifices. He personally is the only human being who goes into the Holy of Holies. The whole Mishkan's him. So he's distressed because these people are bringing a one-time gift. They're presenting their gifts once and then they disappear. That's all. He is daily. In the morning, they open the gates and he's there, and in the afternoon, he does the last of the sacrifices. The whole Mishkan is him. So what is he distressed about? That these people are bringing a one-time gift. He wants also a role to play. And furthermore, if that's his problem, how come he's appeased when Hashem says you light the menorah? So he's got one more role. He's already got 50. You hear the problem? Suddenly when he hears that, he lights the menorah, everything's cool. So, what's going on? The Ramban has about 8 questions. By the time he's finished, this Rashi is lying in ruins. Right? Now, what Rashi means, I'll leave Rabbi Stepsky to. That needs thought. But tonight, let's understand what the Ramban says. And he goes on to say something that is beyond amazing. And if this doesn't move you, there's no hope for you. The Ramban says that what Aaron wanted, he didn't want a role to play. He knew the whole Mishkan was him. He wanted Chanukah. Chanukah means the inauguration, that moment of inspiration, that moment of dedication when you switch on the process. That moment of conception will never come again. The moment of conception when a child is conceived, when the genes of the parents fuse in the formation of a child, that's critical. Once that moment passes, you will never. That moment determines, in that instant when the genes of the parents fuse, the whole process is determined. The color of his eyes and the shape of his nose and the shape of his ear, it's all there. Sure, the pregnancy is necessary in order to develop it. And when the child's born, you start to see these things manifest. But that moment's critical. There's no moment like the moment of origin. If you take a person and you make a cut in their body, it's not too serious. But if you make a cut that size in a fetus while it's developing, much more serious. But the moment of conception, you could move a molecule and have the most far-reaching consequences. The moment of ignition, of inauguration, that first flash when a thing comes into being, that is worth everything. And that's what he craved. He wasn't craving a role. He was craving the inauguration. These people are bringing a gift that switches it on. That's the moment when you throw the switch. You know, I don't know, in non-Jewish society, that's always a very special moment. They get the king to cut it's got to be like the king or the minister or something. He's got to, what are they opening? A new railway station, big deal. But he's got to cut. Or when the ocean liner, right? The queen, like she smashes the champagne. You hope the boat doesn't break. But she smashes the champagne. Like, why does the queen have to do it? Or the king? It's a moment of this is the, dare we say, the christening. I don't know what word you use, but it's like it's the moment of inauguration, right? That is everything. That is precious beyond belief, and that happens only once. Aaron was not dismayed because he didn't have a role. He was totally dismayed because these people are switching it on and he's not involved. That's what Chanukah means. Chanukah means when you dedicate for the first time. And Hashem said to him, yours is greater than theirs. You know why? Because you have Chanukah. I don't mean lighting the menorah in the Mishkan. I mean lights of Chanukah. Your descendants, the priests who descend from you, hundreds of years from now, when the temple lies in ruins and there's no more menorah, and your great-great-grandchildren, the Kohanim, they come into the Greek defiled temple and they inaugurate it a second time. They switch it on for a second time after it's been defunct. That one's greater than this. You know why? Because this one's miraculous. This takes place in a blaze of prophecy and miracles and coming out of Egypt, and there's nothing higher than that. But your grandchildren will light a light in a dark world where there's no more prophecy. Matityahu lived in a world after prophecy, 150 years since any prophets had lived. They will cleanse a defiled temple, and they'll start the mitzvah of Chanukah, which is nothing like this menorah. It's a little flame in a Jewish window, but that one will last till Mashiach comes. This one is temporary. It may be amazing, a blaze of miracles, it's incredible, but it's going to die, because the temple is going to be destroyed. But your grandchildren will come into a defiled temple with no prophecy. Of their own accord, they will light a light. That will start with a flash of miracle that will last for a few days, and will continue as a light in the Jewish window that will take us through to Mashiach. And when he heard that, he was appeased. Now, what does this mean? So there's a principle here which is probably more important than anything else. And that is that all lights that shine, shine twice. There's always a first-time inaugural blaze of brilliance. And that's necessary, but it never lasts. Those life experiences last long enough to make you think they'll last forever. Then they're taken away. Steps, you're allowed to mention Kabbalah? According to Kabbalah, if you look on the first page of the Eitz Chaim, the great Kabbalistic commentary on the Zohar, he says that the first light that shone before the creation was a light of infinite power. That's called the Or Rishon, the first light. It is beyond description in its potency, and it needs to be because it has to open a space where there's no space before. And that light opens a space, and then as soon as that happens, the light leaves. It's done its work, it's opened a space. But it leaves a dark, longing, and aching emptiness, longing for the light that was there, the ecstasy of that experience. And that longing brings back the light a second time. The second time the light shines is nothing compared to the first. The first was infinite to open a space. The second comes into a space that already exists. It's a fine beam of light that is almost nothing compared to the first, but it's the one that's meant to be and the one that lasts. What does this mean? Well, let's think about it. All life experience has two stages. The first one is easy, guaranteed, amazing, done for you, and then it's taken away. The reason it's taken away is you need the first light to inspire you. You need to see what's possible. If no one showed you what you were capable of, you'd never know. But if it were done for you the rest of your life, what's the point of being here? Life always gives you an inspiration so that you see what you're capable of, and then it's taken away. When it's taken away, it's very cruel and very painful, and it leaves you with the mixed feelings. It leaves you with the down and the depression and the sadness of having your inspiration taken away, but it leaves a residue of this is what I could be. Rabbi Miller from Gateshead used to say, imagine you could live for one day. Imagine you could live for one day as the person you would be in 20 years' time if you worked on yourself with spiritual perfection. Imagine you learned Torah 24 hours a day and you worked on your character. Imagine we worked on ourselves as we should. And they allowed you to live now for one day like that. And at the end of the day, you went back to where you are now. How would you feel? You'd feel terrible. But you think, wow, what I could be. If you need motivation to work for the next 20 years, that's what you need. So the way the world is built is that you're first given that flash of brilliance. And as soon as you think it's perfect, it's taken away. And the reason is because stage one is given for free. It's given to inspire you, but it's not you. It comes from outside. Stage two is where it's taken away. Now you have the challenge of making it real, but you know what's possible. And the second stage is most people give up. But the second stage is where if you're a Jew, you get your teeth stuck into it and you start. Let me give you a few examples and maybe it'll be clearer. Let's take a national example to start with. Then afterwards we'll talk about an individual example. Here's a national example. The Jewish people are born in Egypt in a blaze of miracles. They downtrodden and they reach the 49th level of almost no hope. And suddenly a blaze of miracles begins. 10 plagues in Egypt, each one higher than the one before. You know, the Maharal explains, and others also, that the plagues in Egypt were not simply a sequence, they were an escalation and crescendo, each one building on the one before. Each one was more powerful and higher than the one before. How do you see that? One very beautiful way to see it, as the Maharal explains, is to understand that the plagues in Egypt proceeded in reverse order of the statements of creation. You know, the world was built in 10 statements, right? The first is Bereshis, pure beginning. Then there's Yehior, let there be light, so that there's a revelation. And then there are 10 layers of creation. 10 as spheres, as they call, right? The sphirot, the 10 onion skin layers of reality. The Egyptians had so contaminated all 10 layers of reality that there needed to be 10 plagues. Why were there 10 plagues in Egypt? Hashem could have wiped them out in one moment. Because they darkened and made toxic all 10 layers of reality. So each plague in Egypt was a purification of one of those layers. And when you do that, you work from the outside in. You begin with the infinitesimal point of beginning, right? Like the conception, nothing to be seen. And then you build the layers around that. But when you purify, you peel the layers from the outside in. So the plagues in Egypt go in reverse order of the statements of creation. What was the first statement of creation? Bereshis, in the beginning, pure beginning. What was the last of the plagues? Destruction of the contaminated firstborn, the wrong, the immoral beginning. What's the second statement of creation? Let there be light. What's the second last plague? Darkness. It's amazing. You should work through this. Maybe have a share on this. It's amazing to go through the sequence. But what we need for this discussion is when you reach that incredible midnight when the firstborn are destroyed, you've got back to the moment of creation. You've reversed all the way back to Bereshis. Incidentally, I'm sure your minds are racing ahead. Right? After all, you black belts here, Stepsky Talmidim. I'm sure your minds are racing ahead. The whole Torah is this pattern. What's the first of the 10 commandments? I am. What do we say in the Haggadah? The 10th plague, Ani v'lo malach, Ani v'lo saraf, I alone. And which is the first 10 commandments? I am I who am alone. What's the 10th of Abraham's ordeals? Having to kill his firstborn. You see the same firstborn. The whole Torah is this pattern again and again. But the message is when they reach that incredible midnight, when the firstborn, you've reached that pinnacle of spiritual experience. And 7 days later at the sea, they saw more than they saw in Egypt. No human being had ever experienced anything like that. And at that peak of spiritual exhilaration, Hashem says, now it's up to you, and he drops him in the desert. A desert is a place of death forces. When you're 6-year-old, a desert is hot and there's no water. But when you're more mature, you understand a desert is a place of death forces. The Jewish people encountered 10 ordeals in the desert over 40 years, and they failed every one. You're talking about conquering evil. Here's the message. Hashem says, watch the show in Egypt. 10 amazing demonstrations of wiping out evil. And then he puts you in the desert and he says, now you do it. You want to meet me at Sinai, you meet me as equals. I'll do the first step, and then I'll step back and you do the second. You know, Pesach means to leap over. Pesach means to leap over. In Kabbalah, what's written is on the first day of Pesach, you can leap 50 levels in one step. Pesach, to leap over. On the first night of Pesach, it's a miraculous night. You don't have to lock your door. It's miraculous. The Balei Musa say that on the first night of Pesach, you can be anything you want. You can have absolutely anything for free. And then you have to hang on with your teeth and nails and make every day count. Then there's no leaping after that. It's one counted day after another. This is called fly now, pay later. Pesach means you leap to the 50th level for free. That's the inspiration of Pesach. That's why we make it the ultimate educational experience. Talk about chinuch. That is when a child is ignited. What do we do on the night of Pesach? We inspire children with what it means to be who we are. But then, after that Pesach experience, then you get dropped in the desert. You want to meet me at Sinai? We meet as equals. I'll do the first step, you do the second without help from me. The month of Nisan, by the way, of leaving Egypt, Nisan means miracles. And the zodiac of the month, the mazal of the month, is the sheep, Aries. But that's the mazal. Tle, what does that mean? A passive animal that simply follows. No strength of its own. You followed me into the desert. The next month of Iyar in the desert, as we all know, the counting of the Omer, a very difficult time. The second month is the shor, the bull. That animal that doesn't follow at all. It develops its own willful strength, the exact opposite. And the third month, Sivan, of giving the Torah, is the month of Gemini. Perfect harmony between the two. The twins. The two tablets written in oral law, Moshe and Aaron, Hashem and us, all the dualities coming together in perfect love and harmony. Step 1, it's done for you. Step 2, you get no help and you do it yourself. Step 3 is the combination of the inspiration you had in the beginning and the work that you did to bring it to fruition. And therefore, the national experience of the Jewish people, at one level, of course this pattern refracts itself again and again, but the national experience of the Jewish people is like that. Batteries charged in Egypt beyond description, no deserving at all, no work that we've done, about to disappear on the 49th level of thing, uplifted like that, completely unreasonably, for free. And then Hashem says, get the message, now you do it. How does a father teach his child to walk? He picks up the little baby by the hands. The child stands on his feet for the first time. His Abba's holding his hands. What a moment. He takes his first step. And not only is he taking his first step, he can't fall because his Abba's holding his hands. And as he feels the thrill of that moment, Abba, let's go. And then he stands there terrified and alone and abandoned by the one who put him in that situation. But that's when he learns to walk. And then he can run into his father's arms and realize that when his father let go, he was showing more love than when he held his hands. It has to be that way. How did you learn to ride a bicycle? Your father ran along holding the saddle and it was very cool. Then you looked back and you saw he wasn't holding. But that's when you learn to ride. But had he not picked you up and put you there, you would never have done it. But you didn't learn to ride then. You learned when you were on your own. It's always like that. First your mother holds your hand and she takes you across the street, right? At some point, if you're Jewish, when you're about 34, she lets you cross on your own. Dangerous, but that's where you become independent. You know, the second bracha of the Amidah is Yitzchak. That's din. Right? Avram is the first bracha, chesed. The second bracha is din. Yitzchak. Yitzchak means din, cutting off. Detachment, cutting off. And what's the words of the bracha? M'chaya mesim. That's what gives life. That's when you get life, when you get cut off from the source. Then you get independent life. You know what's incredible in Hebrew is breastfeeding. The child is suckling from the mother. When the mother stops feeding the child, you call that being weaned. The word in Hebrew is called gomel. Gomel means to stop nursing, right? It's the same word we use for giving kindness. Gomel chesed. Gemilus chasodim. Gomel chesed. What a weird word. Gomel chesed means I give you. No, the literal meaning of the word is I cut you off. And that's called chesed. Exactly. That's when you give this person, a great Torah teacher makes his students independent of him. An invalid guru makes the disciples dependent on him. A good teacher makes the students independent of him. It's when you cut the person off and give them independence is the real gift. It's painful, it's difficult, it's a sad and dangerous moment. So let's take a personal example. That's a national example. But an individual example. The child in the womb, the Gemara says, he taught the whole Torah. He has an angel, teaches him the whole Torah. He's a light lit above his head in the place of the tefillin. He sees from one end of the world to the other. He knows all cosmic wisdom. He knows the whole Torah. He knows everything. Jews and non-Jews, every human child. As he's about to be born, the angel gives him a shocking blow, and he forgets everything, and he's born as a baby who knows nothing. Why would Hashem teach a child the whole Torah only to make him forget? Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1, it's all given to you for free. Phase 2, it's beaten out of you, but it's deep inside. Phase 1 leaves its residue. You remember the moment of inspiration. You see that light. You carry that with you. So as you move through life, you long for spiritual wisdom because you had it once. You can only long for something you once had. You can't long for something that's got nothing to do with you. Why would you long for it? You long for something that's part of you that's missing. And that's why when you learn something spiritually true, you don't have a sense of learning, you have a sense of recognition. You say, I know that's right. How do you know it's right? Because it resonates. A good teacher brings out the wisdom. A bad teacher indoctrinates. A good teacher educates, draws it out. In the Gemara, when the students ask the Rabbi a question, the Rabbi doesn't answer. What do you think? The students asked Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai about Purim. Why was the decree at Purim? He said, what do you think? A good teacher doesn't give information. A good teacher brings it out. If you've got a good sports coach, he doesn't pick up the weights and put them in your head. You know, you can send a picture to your mother. She'll be very impressed, but you don't build any muscle like that. A good coach makes you sweat blood. You need a coach. He does it the first time for you. He demonstrates. It looks incredible. And then you start doing it, then you can't move for a week. If you're a musician, you hear that piece of music, it takes your breath away. Then you sit down to trot doing it, it's terrible. Terrible. After hundreds of hours, you manage to produce something. But you need to hear it first. So the child is taught the whole Torah in the womb, and then it's beaten out of him, but it's always there. In the depth of your subconscious is all the wisdom you'll ever need. And the question of spiritual searching in the world is to look for your own original wisdom and to have it resonate and bring it out. And when the child is born, that happens again. Pregnancy, fetus, inspired. But even life itself is childhood and adulthood. Childhood is inspired. Children think they can do anything and everything. Ask a normal 5-year-old what he's going to be. He's going to be an astronaut, garbage can, truck driver, police. He's going to be everything. Because childhood is phase 1. Childhood is a stage of unbelievable inspiration. Kids think they're going to do everything. You don't see any limitations. Everything's done for them. This happens to be a male problem, by the way. Male. Because phase 1 is male. Phase 1 is male. The conception of a child is a male experience. There's no difficulty. The male puts in no pain, no difficulty. He just puts in half a genetic code, that's all. It's the woman who brings it to reality with a long walk through the desert of pregnancy and difficulty and pain. I don't mean to put you off, ladies. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But, you know, don't ask a man to go through that. Speaking as a doctor, I can tell if a man had to go through birth, you know, he'd need therapy the rest of his life. I mean, there's no, you know. But maleness is the first phase of inspiration. Maleness is the male gives seed by the billion. The woman gives one egg at a time. Maleness is basically a hopelessly immature explosion of wannabes. It's not that funny. And that's why men tend to the childish or childlike phase, because it's the world. The Maharal says this is why a man can marry many women, because he is a multi-potential source. What woman in her right mind would want more than one husband? One's usually more than enough to, educate. And so childhood is a time of tremendous... Children have no sense of limitation. Have you ever seen a child outside a delicatessen with 1 pound in his grubby little hand and 25 different cookies in the window? What amazing. Then finally he's about to choose one and pay his money. All 24 others start to glow brightly. If you want to torture a child, which is not really a Jewish activity, you give a child an ice cream and then give him a second ice cream. While he's clutching both ice creams, offer him a third. You'll end up with a pile of ice cream and tears, because the child can't understand that you can only have what you can have. The child lives in the fantasy of having it all. This is also why young men resist getting married. When you start to talk to them about getting married, they think, look at the world of women, there's thousands out there, each one more amazing than the next. But if I get married, I'll have only one. So I'd rather have none. Rather the fantasy of all the possibilities. That's the childlike vision of fantasy. The immature mind is always thinking about what could have been. The male mind goes on holiday, wakes up in the morning at 6 in the morning, blue sky, amazing. Now you can swim in the river, canoe in the lake, climb the mountain, ride the horses. Well, you can only do one of those. The male personality spends half the day in bed trying to figure out which one he should be doing. Whichever one he does, he's convinced the others would have been better. The female personality gets busy and does something. This is also why many men in Western society are addicted to reading the newspaper. Man cannot get through the newspaper. He's got to know what's doing in southern Chile and western Mongolia, like the whole world's running under his control. Then it's okay. What woman needs to know what's doing in Western society? She gets busy and does what she has to do. But it's the male totality. And that is the phase of childhood and teenage inspiration, which is necessary. But life closes in on you. Although every 18-year-old male is convinced he's going to be the world's... Every 18-year-old male, he's convinced he's going to be the world's greatest everything. Movie star, athlete, financial, the whole thing. But when he's 28 and 38 and 48 and 58 and not the world's greatest anything, most men keep right on fantasizing that they are the greatest, they just haven't had time to do it, but they'll get there. Others just become depressed. But I mean, but the world closes in. In order to have what you can have, you have to sacrifice the potential for all the others. Can't play every sport and play every instrument and marry every woman and do every profession. When you're young, you think you're going to. The price you pay for the things that can be done in the world is the mature sacrifice of all the others. Good decision making means you weigh the options, and as soon as you get 51-49, then you do the 51 100%. If you play football and you've got 2 receivers, and you think that guy's got a 70% chance of a goal and that one's a 30%, you don't pass 70% between the two. You pass to the 70% 100%. And the other thing becomes irrelevant. It doesn't exist anymore. But the immature mind is always looking over the shoulder, what could have been better. That's why you need to tell young people to get married. All they need to do is find somebody who is attractive and good chemistry and a good, kind person and marry them. If you're male, she's got to be female. But not much else. There's somebody better. There's always going to be somebody better. There's probably somebody better than you. So that is the... And of course, marriage has the same thing. Marriage has 2 stages. The Gemara says that in the spiritual world before birth, husband and wife are fused at the back. There's only 2 fronts. The back is always the side of darkness and negativity, unrecognizability. So there's a perfect relationship, but no relationship. And then they're torn apart and brought down to the world to find each other. That's called Bashir. That means the other half of your own being. And that's why you long to marry, because you're longing for the part of yourself that you lost. The Gemara says that. You can only long for something that has something to do with you. Incidentally, your longing for Torah wisdom is very closely identified with your longing for a marriage partner. That's why the Gemara says that your Torah is called your betrothed. A person's spiritual wisdom is called your spouse. They're both part of you that you had before you were born and now you've lost. You know what's very beautiful that archetypal Jewish couple, Avram and Sarah, as they traveled from Israel to Egypt, they crossed the border from Israel, which is the land of marital, intimate spirituality in Kedusha. They traveled into the Egypt, which is the cesspool of immorality. As they crossed the border from the world of that moral zone to that immoral zone, he says to her, please tell them you're my sister. So when you're young, it means strategy, they'll kill me otherwise. But if you hear the Torah with a bit more refinement, at that moment of reasserting their marital bond, he's teaching that every man has to think of his wife as his sister. What is a brother and sister? Sister, brother, sister are two people who are separate, who were once one in the previous state. Brother and sister are two individuals who have a common origin. Husband and wife are two people who have a common origin. Every husband-wife pair is a brother-sister pair. The Maral says that when Adam and Chava had children, brothers and sisters married each other. That's how the world got going. It's called Chesed Yiboni. There was a perfect marriage in that stage of the world's history. What could be better than marrying? Even later in history, the Gemara says you should marry a niece because there's a closeness, a natural. We're able to do it, and some disagree. But the point is that Torah's not talking mere strategy. He's saying that husband and wife are brother-sister bond. The word ach in Hebrew, which means brother or sister, means to stitch together something torn. If you tear a garment, la'achem means to stitch it back together. Ach, achot, two people who are stitched together from the same original source. And husband and wife are the same thing. And therefore, the marital bond is a phase one in the spiritual world, and then a loneliness, the light is left. And there's that longing for the completion of the self. And that's the long walk through the desert to find the partner, which will eventually be the Sinai meeting. And on a more narrow scale, marriage has that as well. The first phase of marriage is emotional, right? We call that romance. That's phase one. How long does it last? After you get married, about 2.5 hours after you get married. That's why we have anniversaries. An anniversary is a reminding of yourself of what it felt like. But a real anniversary, not where you sit on your phone texting, it's like, I saw this couple in a restaurant, I walked past, the lights were low, there was a candle on the table, and a beautiful rose, they were sitting there texting. I think maybe they were testing each other, I don't know. Every festival is an anniversary. Every Yom Tov is an anniversary taking us back to what that explosion of electricity was when we went through that time. Rav Dessler says that anything we don't have a word for in Torah doesn't really exist. Wonderful principle. Because every davar in the world, every object in the world is a davar that Hashem spoke. He spoke the world into being. So every davar, which is a word in the Torah, becomes an object in the world. So if there's something in the world that doesn't have a word, it must be illusory. Someone's painted it up on the screen, but it's not being projected from the source. Words like etiquette, adventure, fun, chivalry, romance, entertainment. What is adventure? There's no word for that in Hebrew. What is adventure? Going out and doing something thrilling and dangerous for the sake of the fact that it's thrilling and dangerous. What normal person ties a rubber rope to his ankle and leaps off to see how close he can come to becoming part of the scenery? We have a Hebrew word for that, meshuga. So that's a wonderful principle. And there's no word for romance. And Rav Dessler explains, because romance is the artificial feeling that comes at the beginning of an experience. It's necessary, but it's not real. To be confused with love is its illusion. But we have a word for love. Ava is based on hav, which means to give. And one of the most classic teachings of Rav Dessler is that you love where you give. You can't love at first sight and then give anything. That's why parents always love their children more than their children love their parents. Parents always love their children more because the giving goes in that direction. You don't love where you get. Our children are taught wrongly. In modern society, people are taught that where you receive is where you love. If someone makes you feel good, you say you love them. That's like saying, I love fish. You mean you're going to kill it and grill it and eat it. What do you mean you love it? If you loved it, you put it back in the water, let it swim back to its mother. You don't love the fish, you love you. You love what you give. Actually, according to Kabbalah, you can only love yourself. You can only love yourself. The only way you can ever love someone else is where you put yourself into them so deeply. You invest yourself to the extent that you become one, of course you love them. You feel about them like you feel about yourself. The word ahava adds up to the same as echad, which means to become one. You can't do that at first sight. And therefore, that takes time. So the first phase is romance. This person walks into the room and you look at her and suddenly everything goes pink. And, his music bells start ringing, you get this, what is that? She's taking this Caribbean cruise. She comes up on deck. Standing there on the deck is this creature in smart white uniform, cleft in his chin, a few blonde curls. Sharon, you read those? Music wafts in over the waves, Those books end 2 pages later, because 35 years later when she comes up on deck, he's lucky if he doesn't leave him overboard, And if there's music wafting over the waves, it's her hearing, You need phase 1, but it's not real. It's necessary. And it gives you that inspiration. Rambam says that life is like standing on a dark plain on a stormy night. He says you stand there beaten by the rain and lashed by the wind and completely lost. At your moment of greatest despair, suddenly there's a flash of lightning. At that moment you see the road clearer than by day. And as you see it, the light disappears. And the rest of the night you walk through the storm on memory alone of a flash of light. He says some people see more flashes, some people see less, but no one walks in the light. And that's how life is. There's the flashes of inspiration, and that's clear. And then there's emunah. Emunah means to be naaman, to follow it through, even when it's not clear anymore. That's the darkness of emunah. Emunah doesn't mean you do things without any information, just blindly, with no evidence. Very good evidence, but the evidence is no longer there. When a woman's in labor, it doesn't look like she's giving birth. It looks like 2 people are dying. The Rambam, who was a doctor, explains very beautifully when a woman's giving birth, first of all, it looks like she's not going to survive, but the child's got no hope at all. A child in the womb is disposed exactly the opposite way that it needs to be when it's born. Child in the womb, living underwater, it's got holes in its heart with the blood going the wrong way, big blood vessel taking all the blood away from the lungs in the wrong direction, the wrong sort of blood vessels coming out through his liver. The child's got 20 conditions that keep him alive that guarantee death when he's born, within 2 minutes. And you have 20 conditions in your body that would kill a baby instantly if you gave it to the baby. You're talking about inversion from life to death. And I've delivered many babies. You hold this newborn child in your hands, and he goes blue, then he goes purple, makes these terrible gasping moves. He's got no lungs. The lungs are scrunched up to little bits of tissue. He's bleeding like crazy through the umbilical vessel. No hope for this child. And suddenly, as you stand there, the cord clamps down like a cable of steel and stops the bleeding. At the same moment, the holes in the heart close in the blood vessel direction. The vessel from the lungs closes, the blood hits the lungs. At the same moment, he takes his first breath. And 2.5 minutes later, it's all reversed and he's doing fine. And that must have taken a lot of orangutans in the trees during evolution, to get right by accident, A lot of chimpanzees, 2 minutes and it's all. But you have to go through that. You have to go through that where it looks worse and worse and worse until fine. That's why Mashiach is called Chevle Mashiach, the birth process of Mashiach. Anyway, let's close the circle. So with this in mind, and that's why this is such an important idea, because when children are taught this, unfortunately our children are raised in a world that's all phase 1. It's all instant results. It's all phase 1. Recently when I was in my 20s, if I used to make my mother a cup of tea, I don't know if you remember, you used to boil water and put it into a teapot to warm it, then you poured that out. Then you put in fresh boiling water. Then you put in tea leaves to draw. You covered it with a thing to keep warm. While that was happening, you put hot water in the teacup to warm it, then you poured it out. Then you put a strainer. This is how you made tea. Now the guy's dipping a bag and it's taking too long. So now it's got to be freeze-dried. Tomorrow it'll be intravenous, I kid you not, there's a Lipton tea advert on the bus stops. Have you seen it? Perfection, but faster. They're advertising tea because it's quicker. Can you imagine it? The selling point is because it's quicker to make your cup of tea. Can you believe that? If you buy your child a computer, they're doomed. Because the computer does 2 billion functions in the first 2 microseconds. How is he going to, if he marries a lady who doesn't do 2 billion, whatever it is, he's going to look for a faster lady. If you buy your child a computer, make them plant a garden. Because then they'll learn something about life, having to tend something that grows week after week after week. Otherwise, what hope is there? They live in a first phase world. The tragedy is our children are exposed to an amazing picture of romance and they label it love. So when that emotion goes, they think they married the wrong person. Like this young man says to me, Rabbi, I married the wrong girl. I said to him, how long have you been married? 2.5 months. So why is she the wrong girl? He said, Rabbi, when I used to look at her in the beginning, I couldn't breathe. Now, breathing fine. I had to explain to this young fellow that if 2.5 months after marriage you're having trouble breathing, you've got asthma, you know. It's like, Now, let's just come back and close the circle. Jewish history has 2 stages. By the way, think about it. How many times were the luchos given in the Torah? First one broken. They don't last. The first one was miraculous. The Maharal says the whole oral law was written on them. There was no oral law. It was all clear, smashed. And the second one's lost. The Beis HaMikdash destroyed the first one. Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, exiled. Now we're finding our way back. Starts perfect. And it's always taken away. But history has 2 stages. If you make a map of Jewish history, so 6,000 years the world exists. By the way, we now 5784. We are very close. I mean, we have the beautiful hindsight of seeing all the prophetic predictions having come true in exquisite detail, except for the final messianic showdown. But the Gemara says that if you divide the 6,000 years, you go back about 2,400 years, you get to the end of phase 1. That's when prophecy and miracles ended. And we're living in the last 2,000 years with nothing revealed. No prophets, no miracles, revealed miracles. 2,400 years ago, Purim happened, where the light began to fade. What happened at Purim? Well, there was a miracle, but it wasn't obvious. It was a king, his wife was Jewish, he didn't know. There were no manna falling from heaven, no sea splitting, no dead people being revived. Just political events. The Megillah does not mention Hashem's name. Show me one other page of the Torah that doesn't mention Hashem's name on every line. Not revealed. Megillah means to roll up a scroll, and Megaleh means to reveal. It reveals and it hides. The heroine is called Esther, which means the hidden one. Purim means the luck of the draw. Nothing is obvious. It's all luck. And the Jewish people have the wisdom to perceive the divine hand. And 150 years later is Chanukah, where there's nothing. Chanukah is nothing, not even a Mishnah, nothing written. And no prophets, nothing. A last wave goodbye from some candles that burned for 8 days. By the way, that wasn't the real miracle. The miracle was defeating the Greeks. The candles only the Kohanim saw. It was after the war was won. It was a little message, goodbye, you're not going to see me again till Mashiach. So between Purim and Chanukah, which are the external festivals, the ones that are post-biblical, that's where the world goes dark. The light begins to fade at Purim, and it completely fades at Chanukah. Chanukah is the festival of the oral law, where we shine the light in the darkness. That's the light that lasts. That's the meaningful one. The first one Hashem did. You know, he speaks to prophets and he performs miracles. No big deal. He can do whatever he wants. The big deal is what we do when he steps back and he says, now I'll meet you 2,000 years from now when the Mashiach comes. But when you become real. And that's called Torah Sheba'al Peh. We do it ourselves. The Jewish genius is constructing Torah. The first work is to receive it and have the batteries charged. The second phase of history is much more significant. What Aaron was given through his grandchildren, the ones that light the lights themselves, the ones that generate an oral law, that have the courage to put a light in the window in a genocidal world. That's the one that's something to be spoken. That's something to be proud of. And then we do it ourselves. You know, I always think to myself, what was the first rabbinic decision ever made? Decision made by a rabbi, with no assistance from a higher world. Until Chanukah, every major decision made by the Jewish people, you went to the Navi, and he told you what Hashem said. If there wasn't a Navi, you went to Urim V'Tumim. You had miraculous assistance. Comes along Matityahu, and he says, ladies and gentlemen, I've made a decision. Rabbi, what's your decision? We declare war on the Greek Empire. Rabbi, you and whose army? It's me and my boys and a couple of friends. There's 13 of us. Rabbi, the Greek Empire, like 10,000 more elephants. Yeah, I think we could. Rabbi, did you ask the prophet? None of them. Did you consult Urim and Tumim? Haven't seen them for a long time. Rabbi, what makes you think this is the right decision? It's my rabbinic judgment. I think this is great. And they won. The first rabbinic decision wasn't like how we'll plat the challahs, or what spices we'll use for Havdalah, war in the Greek Empire. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh. So history has two stages. First stage, prophetic, incredible, amazing, prophets, no doubt at all. Difficulties, being tested in many ways, but no doubts about Hashem's existence. And then the lights fade. Purim, Chanukah seals it, and then we move into hundreds and hundreds of years, millennia, of darkness, evidence that we're wrong, traitors from within, genocidal deserts of history. But that's the walk that makes us real. That earns us Mashiach. Anyway, these are some Chanukah thoughts, and I think this is the fundamental message of Chanukah. Rabbi Hutner calls it the festival, the Chag of Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's the Yom Tov of Torah Sheba'al Peh. All the other festivals are miracles that Hashem gave us. Chanukah is the miracle that we caused, our ignition. And it's that ignition, that Chanukah Samizbech, that inauguration for a second time, bringing a second light in, that's the one that lasts. Anyway, have a wonderful Chanukah.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.